Hey, some of you might balk at this one a bit, but I'm wanting to talk today about why it is that I oppose an Indigenous voice in Parliament. Now, let me start out by saying I believe the Indigenous peoples of this country have been given a raw deal for 30 years now. I just don't think this is the way forward. I think this is worse than a token gesture. I think it's corrosive. How's it going to work? Are the Indigenous going to have their own elections? Or will these people be appointed by the Crown? I'm old enough to remember ATSIC, the Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission. And what we saw there, I don't want to see again. We had appointees, and then when they weren't cooperating with the state, there were accusations of corruption. And eventually, the voice was taken away. Now, I can't remember the quote exactly, and I probably should have gone and tried to find it. But I'm a big fan of the Dune series. Whilst I don't like the prequels very much, there was a line that stuck out to me in one of them. When the Fremen people were enslaved, there was a comment made about how easily they could be controlled simply by elevating a few and giving them a whip and some authority. And fear of becoming one of the slave masses again would make them your most potent enforcers. Because they don't want to be treated like that again, so they'll keep their brothers down. That's a very real phenomenon. We've seen it again and again. In the American slave situation, they called these good blacks. I believe that's a term that was also used in the fringes of the British Empire. And I think it's a travesty, to be honest. And I'd hate to see that repeated now. Now, I don't think it will put us any closer to reconciliation. In fact, it'll probably pit the poor other members of the community against the black community in some way, as we saw in the 90s. I remember people's objection to the differences in dole payment, depending on the color of your skin. It's not valid, but it creates animosity. And I think a much better way forward would be something like, well, let's have a look at the problems that have largely plagued these communities as they're forced to live under our situation. We've got unemployment, we've got family breakup, we've got drug abuse. None of these are particularly Indigenous issues, but they do suffer more than we do for these things. And it sort of seems counter to the whole concept of self-determination to have a few white appointed black people telling the rest of the black community how to sit in line with the Crown. I've got a fundamental problem with that. And I think something that would be more, to use the horrible current parlance, equitable. 100% tax break for black folks. They had the whole country taken. I don't think we've paid that off yet. Why the fuck do we take a cent from them? Why not let them work and keep the entirety of the fruits of their labor? I'm sure that would help with the drug abuse problem. I'm sure that would help with the feelings of futility. There's nothing more important, particularly to males, than owning the fruits of your labor. Men have to make something of themselves. They don't have the inherent value that society gives to females. So the best thing we could do is give them 100% tax break. Get them back to work. I'd like to see similar reforms to the welfare system in general. Let people keep the fruits of their labor. Let people who've been on welfare for an extended period keep their welfare payment entirely as they get back to work until they can afford to do without it. So they're not immediately faced with the choice of, do I give up all my time for not any more money than I'm currently receiving? It's a ridiculous bargain we're asking people to make. Yeah, but worst of all, back in the days when they were tearing Attic down, we had no trouble taking the power from those guys. I'm not refamiliarized myself with the case to make this video, but I'm sure their corruption was nowhere near on par with the corruption of, say, Mal Colston. It took a lot longer to get him out of power. You remember that big fat fuck running up personal flights? He had the nerve to sit in Parliament for something like 11 months after his corruption was exposed. Yeah, no, I think this is a bad idea. I think this is more divide and conquer. It's worse than a token gesture. It'll be corrosive to reconciliation. It'll be corrosive to the black community. It'll be corrosive to poor white people, poor Chinese people, poor Indian people, poor African people who live in this country. It's just divide and conquer. That's the way of the crown. To divide and to conquer. Because only a conqueror would have the gall to set themselves up and wear a crown. And I think the time of conquest is over. The days of empire are done. If we have a new empire, it'll be one on principle, not personage, not patronage. Certainly not this feudalistic crap that seems to persist. So yeah, I stand with my Indigenous brothers and sisters. I don't think the crown should be playing favourites. I don't think the rest of us should put up with it. It's not the way forward. I hope I've made my point. I live in a town with a large black community. The Stolen Generation Orphanage is just down the road. This town carries a lot of scars. And I see a lot of people in the same social class fighting against each other over melanin. I don't want to see that anymore. It's only together we can do this. If you haven't seen it, look up a little video called The Tiny Dot. Yeah? They need to divide us because of that principle right there. Together we can do this, not divided. We need to be equal before the law, or we don't have any law. Well, that's all I got to say on that matter. More to come. Peace, love, and kung fu. Black Eye out.